Welcome to the Real Life Buyer podcast. In this podcast, you will hear interviews with business owners, entrepreneurs, thought leaders, authors, and technical specialists in their field. These professionals will hasten your development, accelerate your career, and broaden your business know-how. Now, introducing your host, Dave Barr, interviewing with a purchasing twist.
Hello, and welcome to the Real Life Buyer. Identifying and solving a problem are two valuable ingredients that are often needed to create a potential winning company. However, without action, a plan, and huge amounts of effort and perseverance, there are no guarantees the business may begin, let alone flourish and thrive. My next guest, Ryan Margolin, has faced this challenge and succeeded in making his business, Professional Hair Labs, become one of the 500 fastest growing companies in the US over the last 5 years and has sold more than $50 million worth of product globally. So I want to learn more about his voyage and delve into some nuts and bolts of the manufacturing, logistics, and supply chain aspects of his business. So, without further ado, I welcome Ryan onto the podcast. Hi, Ryan.
Hey, Dave. How's things?
Absolutely fantastic. It's, as you know, manufacturing is a passion of mine. So I've been super excited about getting together with you and picking your brains, so to speak.
Yeah, let's do it.
Brilliant. So the first thing I always like to do is to help people understand more about yourself and what you do. So would you mind explaining the kind of catalyst and hence the product that sets you on your journey to creating Professional Hair Labs?
Yeah, so my background is in sales and marketing. It's pretty much since I started working what I've worked in some way, shape, or form. And growing up in an environment where both of my parents, they own their own business, I always naturally, I think, just wanted for myself the ability to be able to work for myself. And what happened was I think it was 2008, 2009, when the economic crash came. I was working in sales at that time, some marketing, and it was in an industry which was hit quite heavily by the downturn. So an opportunity arose at that point. My dad had a business since he started it in 1994 after my mother got sick from chemical poisoning from the products that she was using as a hair technician, and she had to retire early. He sold the hair replacement studios that they had, and he focused on creating a safe and effective product line for technicians and hair wearers. So where that aligned with myself was when the downturn came, I was looking at some different options to see if there was any opportunities. I wanted to kind of pivot. And my dad called and was like, look, things aren't really going too well in the company. I'm not happy with certain things. The opportunities there, if you want to come over for a little while, learn a bit about the business. Had no intention of working in the business at all, and see what you make of it. So myself and my wife, and we had one daughter at the time, we decided to do that. We moved to Florida for a year and a half. And in that time, I spent the first 6 months learning about the business, the mechanics, and looking at the operations. And I realized that there were some really simple problems that they had. And I'm a firm believer is that the simplest solutions is always the most effective. So we stripped back the branding with the company, with the products, and we rebuilt the messaging. And within 18 months of that, we tripled revenue. So we then realized, okay, we had a validated product, a company that had the ability to trade globally, which is why we invested in the European side. And I decided, look, I didn't want to, stay in Florida for the foreseeable. So myself and my wife moved back to Ireland, and we opened our EU operations. And from that point, then my role kind of changed from business to more so marketing and digital. And then from that, eventually a couple of years ago, I became the CEO of the company. And I work in conjunction with my two other brothers inside of the business. And two of us are located here in Ireland, and one of us is in Florida. And we work together to make sure that we continue to push our mission as quick and as hard as we possibly can, because we realize that there's a need for it in the industry.
Brilliant. That's a great story. And it's lovely that the family business has developed and obviously flourished. Now, when I think of manufacturing, there's quite often, particularly in the chemical industry, some decisions to be made about whether you insource or outsource manufacturing. And I know it's not cheap, obviously processing chemicals, but your family decided against outsourcing. And from what I understand from doing my research, that you've expanded your manufacturing capacity tenfold, which is quite incredible. So can you talk us through kind of the reasoning behind your in-house strategy while sharing what you see as the primary risks and benefits that you took into consideration, or your family did, when they made this decision.
Yeah, well, I think it's good to start at the beginning. So naturally, we haven't made our own products, since we've been in business. At one point, we were contract manufacturing them. The one thing we did at the very beginning, or should I say my father did at that time, was he decided to work with a collective of chemists to make sure he could develop the line the way it needed to be developed, and then take those formulas and have them manufactured. Now, when the company started, that was a perfect option. It was a way to get small amounts of batches made to get the product off the ground, or the brand and the line off the ground. But as we started to scale, say for about 15 years, the company was quite stagnant. They remained kind of low 200s, high 300s in the six-figure range. And when we started to hit that velocity of growth in about 2009, after we launched one of our kind of flagship products, which is now our flagship product, we realized the challenges in scaling with a contract manufacturer. Because if two things happen, if you start to grow out of their capacity to manufacture, that becomes a challenge. If you start to push the boundaries of their resources, that also becomes a challenge, and you start to get inconsistent batches, you start to get long lead times. There's a whole collective of different issues. So when we started to grow, we were like, okay, look, this is new territory for us. We didn't realize that this would be a problem. We thought maybe at most we might have some delays on the manufacturing because we have to wait longer to have more made. But it wasn't the case. Everything from quality to quantities, we'd order, X amount of a batch, and we'd be left short 500, 1,000 pounds of product. And it became really testing because we couldn't then really forecast and plan, moving forward for growth. So that was one of the key reasons we started to focus on the potential of making the products ourselves. And eventually that led us to the point where we started to undertake that exercise and put all those plans together. We did as much as we could at the beginning by ourselves, but then we realized we were working in areas that we didn't have the experience. And I think this is part of the personal growth path that you need to be on as a business owner or an entrepreneur or whatever, because you have to be open enough with yourself to realize, look, you can take a guess at it, but if it's not right, it's not only going to cost you, but it's going to set you back a long time, especially in the manufacturing space, because it takes so long to get things done anyway. So we hired some people to come internally, help us with our processes. Some help us with our sourcing. Others helped us, with the types of machinery we would need. And then it came down to picking a supplier. I mean, we looked all over the world: Europe, USA, China, you name it. We've been around. We've even made our mistakes, and we eventually were able to pull together a process that would allow us to accurately procure not only the materials, but the equipment that we needed. So that was a whole big learning curve. But the decision to bring it in-house brought on a whole new set of challenges. I mean, those challenges are anywhere from resources to experience to compliance. There's a hell of a lot more compliance required for making the product in-house than it is from just buying it and having it shipped to you. I mean, yeah, you're responsible for the notification of your products and the correct registrations. But when you're manufacturing, you're not only responsible for that, but you're responsible for the process that go into making everything and storing everything. So it was a big learning curve for us. And we eventually did get there in terms of having our set process of how we do everything, which enabled us to get our GMP certification. But, it's an ongoing process. It never finishes. There's always means and ways to improve things and make them better. And I think ultimately in the day and age we live in now, it's even more important to have those in place because people expect quick turnarounds. They expect the manufacturer that they're working with to heavily invest in the raw materials, to have them on hand so they know exactly when they order, they'll have them in 4 weeks' time. So, it really is about reducing that waiting time for the e-commerce and for the beauty and hair space, because they don't wait. Customers don't wait. When they want it, they want it. If they don't get it from you, they're getting it from somewhere else. So it's up to us to solve that challenge.
Great. This is really fascinating. So I'd like to peel back some things a little bit first. So I can understand that you've now got to a point where your current supplier, your original manufacturer, should we say, is struggling to cope with your huge success. Great place to be. Now, some people would look at perhaps two directions. One, could you find a bigger manufacturer who could take up that extra capacity and have room for growth? Or it could be that you might take on a second manufacturer. Now, you chose not to pursue either of those options. Is there a particular reason why?
Well, actually, there is something that I did leave out. When we did have the problem with consistency and batch control, we did actually look at a much larger supplier. But what we found out is that even though we gave them the spec and the formula, to a T, even the 2 batches we had in-house and the batch after that, 3 of them were different. So, because obviously we would hold samples when we get a batch, we would hold a certain amount of samples in house and leave them there for 3 years, 4 years. And then we were able to compare them. They were all different. And naturally, it didn't happen a lot, to be fair, but it happened, more than a handful of times to where a customer would question it. And it wasn't good enough for us because the kind of ethos and the methodologies that we operate on is safety first because of our experience growing up. And, something as simple as inconsistencies in batches could make someone question the performance of the product or the safety. So it became a problem to the point where we did look elsewhere. And then we were able to find someone who could cope with the demand, but weren't able to provide the consistency in batches. And that was the changing point for us. That was when we're like, all right, we absolutely know we need to pull the trigger on this sooner rather than later.
Right. Yeah. Because obviously some people, particularly in chemical industries, I'm thinking about your classic that you've got all the ingredients to make a cake, but people make the cake differently, and no matter what you do.
Yeah, but it's exact that. You know what? I've used that analogy before as well. It's like a brownie. You could have 2 people cooking the same recipe, but it turns out completely different. And this is the challenge.
Yeah. So I can fully understand you bringing things in to take full control. You document the process. It's your secret sauce, so we say, that you identify and you fine tune and hone and make sure it's repeating after repeating. So I understand that. But now bringing it on a manufacturing plant is no mean feat. That is quite, a huge challenge. You say there's a lot of skill sets there. It's designing the systems and perhaps getting the funding. I'm not sure if that was a challenge or not, the investment. But for all these things, you need the right people, the right companies to work with. And so you have to make some pretty big decisions here. No doubt the budget was in the hundreds of thousands. So how did you go about selecting the right partners? What were the key criteria for you to say, now this is the company I want, these are the people I want to work with over others?
So yeah, that was with a lot of help, to be honest. So I started that part of the journey myself, and very quickly I realized that there is a whole skill set required that even the most experienced electricians or the most experienced technicians or engineers don't know. You need people that actually have real world, practical, hands-on experience in the industry to be able to provide you with the information you need. So we had to hire people to do that. And fortunately for us, those people are on our team still to this day. So we had to make the decision to front load the investment of hiring people to help us build it. And that's and the hundreds of thousands actually turned into multi-millions in the end, because it wasn't just about acquiring the equipment. It was about requiring the suitable space for it. So, warehousing, making sure that the warehouse is correctly connected then to the production space, which is correctly connected to the fulfillment space, finding an area large enough for that in a central location to, I suppose, attract a good team, So there was a whole set of challenges. And you know what? I think I've learned more in the last 18 months than I have in the last decade. So, but it all doesn't happen without the right people on the team. And you know what? You can read about it and you could ask as many questions as you want. But ultimately, I think my opinion on it is, after going through it, unless you look at getting the right people on the journey with you, it's going to be a very challenging and hard road, which you will make mistakes on. And when you're dealing with manufacturing, they happen mistakes, but you can't afford to make too many of them.
Sure. It's quite interesting here because now you're quite reliant on people. So I guess the location, as you say, where you put your manufacturing plant is quite critical. it needs to be within an area where there's that competence, that resource, that it's at hand. No doubt you probably need quite a bit of support from the sort of the local councils, because people are quite often nervous about manufacturing. What waste streams are there? Are you going to pollute the environment? Is it too near housing? All that kind of stuff. So you had quite a few challenges there again in trying to find that sweet spot where everybody is ticking boxes. Now, do you find that particularly onerous? Do you find there was lots of support in that journey?
100%. And I think that's what I love so much about Ireland itself, is that the level of support for companies who export and who manufacture are extremely reliable and solid. And if there is a box that cannot be checked, the supports are there to help you get it checked. And I think that's the difference. Look, we have an operation in the States as well. And you know what, it's there are some supports there, but what I've found is that the supports that we've had here in Ireland have enabled us to create a lot more jobs much faster as well. So it is key, it is key.
Yeah, just I understand. So I guess the plant in Ireland, is that obviously the key manufacturing center, and the US company is a subsidiary, basically a second plant.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So is that a copy paste? So did you take the model that you've got in Ireland and say, right, we just need to replicate this, perhaps even scale it up bigger for the bigger market? Is that how it worked?
Some of it. We decided not to roll it all out because, we have, look, there's certain, from a strategic tax perspective, there are certain parts of the model which need to be held directly and solely inside of the Irish entity. So that there's aspects of the model that are rolled out in the States, but ultimately the principal manufacturing facility is here.
Right. Now, I guess another challenge is with two locations, the legislation that is near to your plant will be different. So you'll have to meet different criteria. And that's, I guess, where is there a risk at that point that your secret sauce, your recipe, the things that you do, you can't identically replicate, but you still need to make the same product. So how did you overcome the challenges of learning, going to say, the two legal entity requirements, shall we say, and making sure they still produce exactly what you wanted at the end of the day?
That actually came during the process of building our buildings, because we were dealing with the city. For example, our US location is in Zephyr Hills in Florida. While we were building the building from the ground up, we were dealing with the city and got all of those requirements and legislations in place before we started the build. So we knew that exactly, depending on what we were making, we knew that things were being disposed of correctly. Now, look, we're a cosmetic company, so there's not many things that we would have in our inventory that would be, say flammable or dangerous. But we just had to make sure, as you said, a box ticking exercise, that we knew exactly what we needed to do so we could make things consistent across both, locations.
Yeah. I've got some experience in the food and biopharmaceutical industry, and I know there's various regulations, particularly you talk about FDA certifications and so forth. Were you lucky enough to find that your recipe in Ireland was perfectly acceptable in the US, or were there things you had to change to make it fit that local requirement?
No, and I think this is one of the advantages that we have found personally as a company by making the principal manufacturing facility in Ireland. European regulations are predominantly a lot more strict than they are in the US. And, look, I mean, there's night and day in differences between banned substances and ingredients, to take one example. So we find that by following the guidelines in Europe, we're pretty much good to go in the States. There's no crossover, because anything that's banned in the US is already banned in Europe. And there's a much larger list here in Europe than there is in the States. So I think, there's nothing showing me now at this point we will ever fall into that challenge.
Yeah. Well, that's really good to hear, because I know there are subtle differences sometimes that can easily trip people up. So that's great news.
And changing a formulation or having to recall a formulation is not a space that any manufacturer wants to be in, So fortunately for us, we've never had a recall. But having said that, touch wood that never happens.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the fact now you've got your chemicals, you now have to have the bottles and all the packaging materials and everything else. Now, are you working as a global business in respect that your supply chains source from the same companies, so that you could pick up the two products in one country and another and not know the difference? Or do you have to buy some things locally in both areas that just bring in a subtle difference between the two, or the methods of manufacture have to change slightly because of those variations?
So we've been fortunate in that hasn't been the case for us. So where we source, so we would actually, obviously, when we're talking about raw materials, we would go direct to the manufacturer, and naturally they have different distributors in different parts of the world. So, consistency is reliable. We don't, like, for example, we don't bring any of our materials in from China. All of our things are sourced either in Europe or they're sourced in the US. Usually, if they're sourced in the US, they usually come from a European manufacturer in the end anyway. So consistency has always been easy for us. Look, logistics have been a challenge over the last 18 months. I don't think there's a single business on the planet that exports or imports that has, we'll say, any different. We are seeing a slight, ease on that, but not to where we need to be. But I think it forces people into the perspective to look at different options. You look, at the end of the day, I'll give you a prime example. Let's say, you're ordering plastics from, let's say it's China, right? Let's say you're getting plastics or bottles from China. Container from China might cost you $15,000 to $17,000 now, where it used to cost you maybe $6,000 to $7,000, right? Well, what's happening now in Europe is that people are becoming a little bit more clever and they're using trains. They're bringing it into Turkey, and they're bringing it from Turkey into Europe, and it becomes a heck of a lot more cost effective. So things like that, people maximizing their space inside of containers. If you say you try to fit, say, 22 Euro pallets in a 40-foot container, you've got all this space on top of the pallets that's fully stackable. So you're putting loose cartons in to make sure you're maximizing the space and bringing down your cost. People are forced to look these ways now, where they weren't so much in the past. I don't see this changing anytime soon, but we do see a slight ease. So hopefully over the next year to 18 months, we might see some sort of stability in the logistics cost, because everything is just going up. So, naturally, there's only so much as a company you can absorb.
Yeah, it does force companies to become more innovative, for sure. And
absolutely,
you don't want to ship fresh air. Basically, that's the bottom line. Fresh air is terrible.
I know.
So you want to feel, get a 40-foot and perhaps a high cube, just to, that sometimes helps. That's all the difference. It does help. But no, I understand the costs have absolutely skyrocketed. And that's if you can get containers at one time.
That's the other thing. And I think that's the importance of relationships. You need to, look, it's all well and good shopping around for pricing in different containers, but you need to go all in, with the relationships you have, because at the end of the day, if you're able to go all in and make a commitment, it actually ultimately helps the freight partner acquire more space at a better cost. Now, it might not be a whole lot, but every little is something. It's like, even prime example, it's some trucking companies in the States, if a 40-foot container weighs over, I think, what is it, 24,000 tons, or sorry, to 24 tons, something like that. It fines you before delivery, but that fine is only like $300 or $400. If you think about the amount of product you can get, you can put an extra 4,000 kg of product onto a container, and it costs you an extra $400. People are just doing what they have to now.
Yeah.
Look, it is what it is, but it will change in the future, I'm sure.
Yeah. So let's talk about you said the suppliers in this. Now, I'm not sure if you've maintained the same relationships with the same suppliers and they've grown with you. If that's the case, then that's very helpful, because nobody wants to change supply into the unknown. So, but how has the relationships developed? How has the negotiations changed as you've grown and brought them along? How did you find that journey with your supply base?
It was quite smooth, because we've always been very transparent. So, naturally, as we started to experience exponential growth, where, we went from, say, 1 million in sales to 10 million in sales over a period of 3 years. Naturally, suppliers are looking at you going, what are you guys doing? So being transparent with them has enabled us to, create a really strong relationship with them, where they will go above and beyond, and, they will make things happen for you that they normally wouldn't. For example, if you need let's say, for example, a raw material manufacturer, if you need a short batch of coloring made for a particular product that's custom. Normally you'd be talking, minimum IBC 1000 kg of the stuff. But if you're doing a, custom run for a small customer and you're ordering, let's say 100 grand a month from them in terms of product, they'll make you that 25 kg batch, no problem, So it's just about transparency. So as, you actually get more benefit. It's not just about ordering more and getting a better price and negotiating a better price. You also get other attributes that come along with that. And I just feel that as long as you stick to the relationships you have and it's a win-win on both sides, everyone's laughing.
Yeah. I know as much as anybody that pricing has been a real challenge, certainly in the chemicals industry, about plastics, so many things have rocketed in price. Now, that's going to put an awful strain on you. It's putting a strain on your margins if you don't want to pass that on to your customers. So how have you balanced that trade-off with the difficulties your suppliers have experienced, the difficulties you're experiencing, no doubt, with your energy costs and raw material costs as well? How have you kind of found a compromise through this really difficult time?
So my position as a CEO and the way I kind of look at the way this company was grown, it was really bootstrapped. It was like, for me, my mindset was remove as much red tape as possible and go as quickly as possible, fall over as many hurdles as you need to, learn the lessons, and let's grow fast. There was a point where that worked, but then you had to kind of be a little bit more strategic about it. But I'm still of the mindset where we haven't passed on a price increase for 95% of our products in over a decade, right?
Wow.
I'm a firm believer is that, your margins are hit, but my next question is, okay, let's not look to the customer for that solution. Let's find out what we need to do to increase sales internally to increase the volume. So that is what has helped us through this period. We've tried to be a little bit innovative in terms of the products we supply. We've done things that weren't really in our remit, but we knew how to do them. So we supplied them. Volume went up, and we were able to just maintain pricing. So look, we have lost, quite a few percent in our margin over the last year and a half. But the truth is you can't keep asking the end consumer to pay more all the time, even though, it is merited and warranted. Look, it's no one, like, for example, plastics manufacturing, no one is, pulling the wool over anyone's eyes. The cost has increased. Energy costs increase, equipment's maintenance increase, cost of living is increasing. So that's a real cost. And unfortunately, the manufacturers, they have to pass that on. Us as the company who supplies the product, which people know and love, it falls on our lap. They don't know who makes the bottles. They don't care who makes the bottles. They only care about the price they're paying for the product they want from us.
Yeah.
So that's really, that's my mentality. It's just, what can we do to sell more?
Yeah. And that leads really nicely on to my next thought. You've moved from a domestic company or your customers in the domestic market to a global sales strategy. That's a huge transition. You bring in so many different factors in. You've got to research the markets, understand what they like or don't like, and how to import and export and do all those other things. So can you share us some of that transitional journey that you've had to go through to get to a high performing global supplier?
Yeah, I think it's really at its core, just not being afraid to make the mistakes and do it. There's a lot of front loaded work in moving into another country. And you might speak to one distributor and get it completely wrong. You might pitch and present, like, for example, I was in a meeting not too long ago with someone from the Japanese market, and got through the presentation and was having a cup of coffee with the person, and they explained to me some really important parts of culture, Japanese culture, and the way they view Ireland, that would have been absolutely hugely beneficial to the presentation, and it might have secured the deal, but it didn't. And that's okay. I learned something. You have to be willing to admit that what works in one place does not work in the other. And I think that was the biggest mistake I made when I made the transition from the US over to Europe. I was like, the first 18 months when we tripled revenue, I was like, this is amazing, brilliant. We validated the product. Let's invest here. Let's go. I took the same principles, the same methodologies, put them into Europe, and it fell flat in its face. It took me like 6 months to learn my way around it, dealing with people and the way they did business, and just respecting the process, because look, when my eyes are set on something, it's ferocious. There's nothing that's going to get in my way to achieving it. But I realized that sometimes it requires a little bit of pace and to slow it down a little bit and not be so aggressive with things. So I do think, when it comes to growing a global company, you have to be willing as a person to take the time to really engage and discover parts about the culture of the country that you're moving into. Without that, I think it's going to be very difficult for you to build any relationship.
Yeah. You've got to look through the eyes of your customer.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's their
or the
it's their wallet.
distributor that wants to, supply the product, because one thing I did learn is that, you could have the best product in the world and the need in that country for it. But at the end of the day, if the relationship can't be built with distribution, it's going to be tough. You're not going to sell, 10% of what you could potentially sell into the country direct, so it's important. Culture is hugely important. I've learned over the last while.
Yeah. I guess from the perspective then, sending your product out to those countries, you obviously brought in the resources and the competence to help you to export successfully to all the different regions then.
Yeah. So thankfully, we have good logistics partners. Like, for example, our air freight partner is DHL. For most places, we do use UPS a bit, but DHL have a very hands-on team where we can call them and be like, okay, well, look, we're about to develop this relationship. It's going to be projected X. Who can we talk to in your organization that can help us make sure we have everything in line? So yes, that's an absolute necessity, because there's been times over the years where, I'll give you a prime example. We decided we were going to test a little bit in the Japanese market. We sent a package direct to Japan into Amazon's fulfillment centers, and it got to customs and it got sent right back. So that to me was like, okay, look, we're going to have to, we're going to have to do a little bit more research here, not just send it in and hope for the best,
Indeed. Yeah, I know some of the big providers, you talked about UPS and such, that when you get to a certain size and scale, they'll actually put one of their own people within your company. Is that something you've enjoyed the benefit of in any way?
Oh, 100%. Look, like even, today is a prime example. We had a package that was being picked up in the US, and look, I mean, without it contained, lithium batteries, and without the right clearance and packaging and stickers, you'd never get it out of there. So I was able to pick up the phone and actually get that resolved so we could get it over and not have any challenges, So yeah, there is a huge benefit to that.
Brilliant. Well, I'm looking at keep an eye on the time. I've got one more question to ask, but tell people now, where's the best places to go and find out about your products, what you do, where are your social media channels?
Yes. Look, I mean, our company name is Professional Hair Labs. We're on all major social media channels: Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. My personal hangout is LinkedIn, so I can be found there. But look, I mean, from a manufacturing perspective, it's just as simple as searching our Ghost Bond brand or Professional Hair Labs, and you'll see us, on the search engine results. Look, our cosmetic adhesive products are the most popular in the market. So, if you haven't heard of it, it would only be a matter of time before you do. So it's just simple search for wig glue or hair glue. We'll bring up all of our products.
Fantastic. I could do a little bit of hair myself, actually.
That's okay. We can help.
Mine's disappearing.
Yeah, but look, from that perspective, I think it's about a lifestyle choice as well. So some people who are losing their hair and experience hair loss are okay with it, and that's cool too. Because there is a time restraint and a commitment to maintaining it. So some people just don't want that, and that's fine.
Yes, right. Yeah, I've resigned myself to the fact it's going, and that's all there is to it. Yeah. Okay, so off to the last question now. You've been through an incredible journey and you've learned an awful lot. And I think that's a fantastic story in itself. But in that time, you would have, and you have mentioned some significant setbacks and hurdles that you've had to deal with, and some fabulous wins as well. Now, if we were able to wind back the clock, knowing what you know now, given that opportunity to correct or prevent some things from happening, what would you share with the audience right now? What's some of the key highs and key lows where you said, if only I'd done this and I would do this way this time, given the chance?
Yeah, I think, looking back, I think I would have focused in on personal development a lot sooner, because one thing when you're building a team and you're scaling a company, what I've realized is that the people you work with, it's actually quite similar to a marriage. It's what you do on a daily basis is either going to do one or two things. It's either going to bring your team closer to you or drive them apart. And I think as a leader, it's vitally important that you're leading that direction and bringing everyone closer, because proximity is power. And I wish I knew that sooner, because you know what, I think we would have actually probably moved too fast for a lot of the bad things to happen that have happened over the last, few years, especially around, say, counterfeits and stuff. So that would be the key lesson from a loss and a win. You can pull them together. Is that look, just develop yourself as a leader and just show up. Make sure you're there and make sure that what you're doing each day is bringing your team closer together and not leaving them out in the abyss.
Yeah, it's the first time I've heard that proximity is power. That's very thought provoking. That's excellent. Just I'm now intrigued. I'm going to ask you something else now. But the culture in your company, how would you describe the culture?
I have to force our team to take days off.
Wow.
I don't expect it, but look, people are not shouting and knocking the door down to take holidays. And that to me is a sign of good culture in a company, where they're not like, oh my God, I can't wait till Friday sort of job. Monday to Friday company. I do fully expect everyone, when they go home, to spend their time doing the things on themselves that they want to do. And when we're here, we show up and we do what we need to do. I believe proximity is key. I'm not a person I'm not a person who believes in a whole lot of remote working. I think if you want to achieve big things, you have to be close together. And that's just my belief. People could throw statistics in my face all they want. But through my experience, I've tried both, and only one way works in my eyes. So proximity is power.
That's brilliant. That's a great thing to finish on. That's fascinating. I could probably sit here and talk to you for hours, Ryan, but I know I can't. So what I can say is that's been an incredible podcast recording there. I've really enjoyed every minute of it. There's so much I think we could pull out if we spent more time. But thank you so much for sharing your journey and all these incredible tips. And now I've got a new saying as well at the end of it. So thank you very much, Ryan.
Thanks, Dave. I appreciate it.
Take care.
Bye.
So there's another Real Life Buyer podcast. I do hope you enjoyed it and it's given you some ideas and inspiration for greater action and achievement. If you are a purchasing or a supply chain professional, business owner or director, come and join my Facebook group, the Purchasing and Supply Chain Community Hub, a safe place to engage with like-minded, friendly people. See you soon. Bye.